Good morning, everyone. All right. So let's start with the session. So from today, we are going to start with another new topic, and that is test classes. Now, before we start with this, let me try to give you a little background so that we would understand like why we require to prepare test classes. Now, see, we have so far we have learned a lot of many things related to the Salesforce product development. And while learning with all these concepts, we gradually realize that uh, whenever whenever a product development, whenever a project development is being carried out with this technology, particularly Salesforce, so we can utilize. There are a lot of what you can say is the out of box functionalities within the Salesforce. What you can utilize. If I would, if I wanted to give certain examples, I can say that the entire product development, if we go with certain other technologies like Java, maybe a .NET, or maybe with some of the good technologies related to the front end and the back end developments, that time the entire product development uh, that involves a lot of coding efforts. For example, Java is one of the best example for that, because whenever we are doing something in Java is entirely a code based language. That means even if you are building up a form, even if you are creating a certain user interface, that time that has to be coded. That has to be coded entirely. That has to be coded entirely. Means every single feature what you would create, there would be a background coding for that. But now let's compare Salesforce with other technologies, and let's try to understand how. Although, see, we already did that discussion. We did that during our initial days. I guess maybe the first week when you guys come to this training, and I was trying to introduce Salesforce with you guys. So that time as well, we had this kind of discussion also. But let me just take a quick recap of the things, because I feel like you should understand why we write down the test classes, and for what components, for what are those things for which writing a test class is required, and what are those things, what are those features of Salesforce that we use during a product development, which for which there is no requirement to write down the test classes. Let's try to understand. Salesforce is that good technology. Salesforce is that good technology which involves if you are creating a product, for example, if you are working on a project, if you are creating a product, if you are working on a certain type of business requirement where you are implementing something, you are implementing a solution for a kind of business requirement, and Salesforce is involved. So Salesforce have a lot of good things. A lot of good things are there inside in the Salesforce, which the most important thing is like inside the product development, there are a lot of the things for which we certainly don't require to write down the codes, and which could be created by using the built-in functionalities, by using the out-of-box functionalities of the Salesforce, by which what Salesforce has already given. And all those topics we already have covered during our admin module. So whatever you have studied during the admin module, like you have studied how you can create an entire CRM application. You can create an entire CRM application. Apart from sales, service, marketing, communities, there are a bunch of standard applications present inside in the Salesforce. Apart from those standard applications, Salesforce also give you this flexibility that you can create your own application, your own custom application if you want. Now, creating an application does not require any sort of coding. And you know how we can create an application inside Salesforce by using certain navigations, by going to certain predefined menus over there. You just have to uh, make certain mouse clicks, fill up a small form by entering a few details over there. You were being able to create a custom application in the day one itself. And that to be that custom application what you have created becomes a fully functionalized custom application from day one itself. It would contain all the features of Sales Cloud, Service Cloud. Whatever features, for example, if you wanted that my application should have account contact and opportunities, sales, or rather my application should have code, price book, cases, solutions, Service Cloud, you can definitely incorporate all those objects because these are some of the standard functionalities. We used to call them as a standard objects. But try to think beyond this boundary. If I would ask you, what is an opportunity? What is a price book object? What is a quote object? What is the role of case object? What is the role of solution object? What is the role of account object, contact? Try to think like a person who has, uh, who may be a business, try to think from the business perspective. That is what I wanted you to visualize. If you would start thinking from another angle, if you start looking into this from another angle, you would realize these all are the business related entities, and they are very significant. There is an important role of every object, every entity what you have learned so far. So Salesforce is that kind of technology where we can literally develop a lot of the things without writing codes. You can have applications, you can create objects if you want by your own object. You can have custom fields, you can create custom fields. You can map relationships between them. Then there are certain functionalities, there are like formulas. You can put up certain validations over there. You can use roll-up summaries. You can create reports and dashboards, analytics parts. Then you can also create a lot of business rules automatically. Workflows and process builders are although going to be decommissioned soon. So we'll talk about flows. We're going to talk about flows. So with using a lightning flow, you can build up a lot of business process that happens automatically without any involvement of the human being. You can do a lot many things with business automation tools like process builders or lightning flows. Then you can set up the entire security system. You can set up the users. You can manage the users. You can decide what kind of access should have to be given for a particular user, what has to be restricted from a user. You can easily done this all. You can easily do this all either with permission set or with the profiles. You can set up certain automated rules like assignment rules for case object, for lead object. You can decide the level of access of a record by record sharing, either by manual sharing or by automatic sharing by writing a sharing rule. So there are a lot of functionalities. This product Salesforce, when it has been designed from 1999 was the first time when the Salesforce was being introduced only with the Sales Cloud. In 1999, Mark Benioff, along with three other guys, they have introduced the world with a terminology called as Dreamforce. Although Salesforce was, it was, later on after 3 years, it has been renamed to Salesforce. When it was introduced in March 99, the name was Dreamforce. They initially provide the functionalities only with the Sales Cloud. Later on, they added everything. And now you know that after every 3 months, that means round in a year, we got 3 releases, and every release come up with certain improvements. And this is the answer for those people who used to think that whatever comes in IT, there's a time and then it goes outdated. That depends on the kind of technology. If technology still is improving itself, if technology is increasing its bandwidth, if technology is providing the solution for a large variety of business, there is no question that this technology would going to become obsolete one day. It all happens with those technology where there is no significant changes. There's no significant changes according to the time. Time has been crossed, product has been same. Yeah, we can assume, we can say for those products, they become obsolete one day because the entire surrounding has been changed and the product is no more providing the solution. But this is not going to happen with Salesforce in any case. So this is the answer to those people, those who think that there would be a day when Salesforce is going to become obsolete. It's not going to be happen. It's not going to be happen in any case. Salesforce is that company of software which is continuously working on to expand its solution. It has started only with Sales Cloud. Now there are a lot of the clouds, and beyond the cloud, Salesforce has become number one CRM provider. There is no other competitor who can stand with that much height as the Salesforce is now. There are a lot of the cloud sales, service, marketing, community, health, education, manufacturing, NPSP. There are a lot of the clouds right now, and they are artificial intelligence is one of them. AI cloud recently. Initially, it was only Einstein, but Einstein works only with the analytics part. That was an extension what you have studied in reports and dashboard. Einstein Analytics was just an extension. But now Salesforce itself come up with a new product, particularly a new product for artificial intelligence and IoT, and that is something called as AI cloud recently. So there are a lot of the things that is happening with the Salesforce, guys. Don't think like that you are with a technology that is going to become outdated. It's not possible. At least your life, my life, we can easily survive within the same ecosystem. There's no question to have any doubt on this. Now, let's come back to the discussion. I don't want it to lose my track. There are a lot of the things which can be done without writing a code. Every such entity, what you have studied so far, for that requirement, let's say if I would ask you to disable a user, if I would ask you to restrict a user, either by profile or a permission set, if I would ask you to grant something to a particular user, or if I would ask you to write down the assignment rule that as soon as a lead would enter, into the system, that should be assigned to either to a particular user or to a particular queue. You can do this all without writing a code. This. We have studied every feature of non-coding. There's nothing left. We have studied every feature. Every feature of non-coding we have studied. All right, we have studied every feature of non. So every such a kind of functionality, what we have studied where there is no coding, you can deploy it directly. That is the best part. For example, if you have created a flow, you have created an object, you have created a custom field, you have created a report, you make certain changes in the profiles, you have created a new permission set. You can deploy every non-coding element directly, and it would not ask you for any sort of code coverage. So that is the reason your first priority should always to build up a functionality without writing the code. If you can do something with the flows, don't write down triggers. Understand? If you can do something with the code, with the flows, for example, there is a certain business automation which requires to be get created. And if you can create that automation, let's say with process builder, let's say with the lightning flows, then don't write down triggers for that, because flows can be deployed directly. But for all coding things, like you studied how to write down Apex classes, you studied how to write down triggers, you have studied how to write down something called as batch class, schedulable class, a normal class having a future method inside in that. You would be going to learn something called as web services, APIs, application program interfaces. So every such VF controllers, Visual Force, I have given you this for your self-study material. In the Visual Force programming, the backend part, is something called as VF controller. It's, again, that is just an Apex class. So basically, every programming component, a normal class, schedulable class, batch class, triggers, APIs, if you have created a business logic with them by writing a code and you wanted to deploy this, then you certainly would require something called as code coverage. Without code coverage, we cannot deploy. Without code coverage, we cannot deploy. We cannot deploy. But where? If I'm saying we cannot deploy, okay, deployment usually happens either between a sandbox to sandbox. All right. Deployment usually happens between a sandbox to sandbox or between sandbox to production. So I have told you a lot of many times, but still, but this is the appropriate time. So if your deployment is going on between one sandbox to another sandbox, if your deployment is going on between one sandbox to another sandbox, that time particularly we don't require to have any code coverage. Example, uh, if you are deploying a class or maybe a trigger or maybe a batch class, anything among this, if you are deploying it, by the way, from one sandbox to another sandbox, you would not require to have any code coverage. Code coverages are particularly required when you are deploying something from a sandbox to production. But as a best practice, guys, we even try to maintain the code coverage from its initial stage. That means, for example, if this is a sandbox, dev sandbox, and let's say this is either QA or let's say it is UAT, whatever it is. There could be multiple forms of sandboxes, all right? And this is not just QA and UAT. There could be multiple forms of sandboxes. That depends between organization to organization. Some of the organizations just have 2 levels of sandbox. Maybe some of them would have 3 levels, maybe 4 levels. That particularly depends between organization to organization. And literally, there is no standard. There is no standard rule for every one of them that when you are creating this, you'll have to follow the same pattern. It's not like that. It differs between organization, but rule is same. If you are migrating something from one sandbox to another sandbox, that time you don't require to have code coverage, but it is recommended. It is recommended that even though if you are deploying this from one sandbox to another sandbox, you should give code coverage that time only. Although it is not required, Salesforce has not imposed you any rule, because code coverage are required when you are particularly deploying the final version of code, the final version of the code from a sandbox to the production. That time code coverage is required. And how much it is required? It is 75% of quality code, as you can see it has written. 75% of the quality code. Minimum, you should maintain 75% for every classes, apart from trigger. For every classes, you should have 75%. Whereas for trigger, you should at least have 1% of code coverage. 1% of code coverage. Now, Now, saying this, that trigger should have at least 1%, whereas classes should have at least 75%. How we are going to calculate this? How we are going to obtain that much of quality code coverage? So this is the reason, guys, we are going to learn how to write down test classes. Test classes particularly is that feature of Apex programming which provides code coverage, which authenticate the code coverage, which declares the code coverage. Oh yes, this is a class and this class is having, let's say, 80% of the code coverage. Now, who is that authority which can say that this class is having 80% code coverage? So that is something called as test class. So basically, test classes are only written only for the programming components, only for the programming things like Apex class, triggers, web services, schedulable classes, batch classes. These are the coding components what we have studied. So they require to have code coverage, and for them we have to write down test classes. All right, go with every, whatever theory has been written over, just go with them. Just go with them. You're going to learn. You're going to understand a lot of the things from there. I would just start by what is the syntax? What is the syntax? So syntax is at the rate is test. If you are creating a class, a test class, how would compiler going to understand that this is not a normal class, it's a test class? You have to annotate it. You have to, in the beginning itself, you have to decorate it with an annotation called as at the rate is test. So is test, at the rate is test, is that annotation, is that keyword. When you start a class by saying at the rate is test, the Apex runtime engine would identify, oh, this is a test class. And there's one more thing you should know about test classes. See, many time I have told you that we always try to optimize the code as far as possible. We always try to reduce that code in terms of number of lines, maybe in terms of number of characters. And why we do that? Why we always, as a good programming technique, as a good programmer, we always try to optimize the code. So why we do that? So there were many time during our discussions, I have told you that there is a governor limit. There is a governor limit. And this is not just about single program, like what to say, overall in your organization, right? Overall in your organization, how much number of lines of the code you have written and how much number of characters, as you can see, the percentage of the Apex is 0.62 with this organization. Currently 37,000, around 37,000 characters, around 37,000 characters have been utilized. The allowed limit is 60 lakh, as you can see. Once 10, 100,000, 10,000 lakh, 10 lakh, 60 lakh, which is 6 million actually. So this is what? This is a governor limit. This is a governor limit. You cannot exceed more than 60 lakh lines of characters and 1 lakh lines of program. Cannot go beyond. So this is why we always try to optimize the code as far as possible. We always tries to reduce the number of lines or maybe number of characters in the code as far as possible. As far as possible. So this is one of the governor. All right. But understand. If inside in your program, if you have commented out something, right? If you have commented, for example, you know what this symbol actually means. Whatever I'm writing in this statement, that's a single line comment. The multiple lines, if you wanted multiple lines, we usually do it like this. We usually do it like this, right? This is multiple line comment symbol. So basically, if you have commented out something, that line all of the characters inside in that line are not going to be get counted for your governor limit calculation. This is an excluded part. In the same way, when you define a class as a test class, whatever has been written inside in that class, all of the number of lines and the characters, they are not counted inside governor limit, by the way. This is again one thing which I feel you should know. Test classes, all the number of lines you have written inside test classes, all the characters you have used inside test classes, they are excluded from the governor limit counting. What is a governor limit? Not beyond 60 lakh characters, not beyond 1 lakh lines of the code. But whenever this governor limit is calculated, all of the test classes have excluded, and in normal class, whatever you have commented out, even that is also excluded. That is not included while calculating this governor, right? This is again, I feel you should know. All right. So how would you write down a test class? How would you proceed for testing and everything? This has been written over here. There are a lot of theory, which I mean, you have to read. I will just take directly a program and I'll explain you everything from this program. So what I'm going to do, I would first of all create a class. I'm just going to copy because I'm not interested in this class. I'm rather interested in the test class. So I would quickly create a class for you guys. I'm just copying and pasting out that. I'm not going to waste my time in writing that simple class. So I would be creating a new class over here with the name called maths operation utility. And if you could look into the code, what this class is doing, this class actually is demonstrating certain mathematical operations. Just save it out. Like there's a method called as addition, which is performing the addition of 3 integer variables. There's a method called multiply, which is performing multiplication, division, and modulus division, right? This is pretty simple to understand, I hope. So this is a class, let's say. This is one of the class, and we wanted to write down test class. Let's see how you are going to do that. Okay, so I would first of all would go and create a new Apex class. I would first of all go and create a new Apex class. See, usually the name of test classes, how you name the test classes. What is a, what to say? I mean, what is a common trend that I'm telling you? And there's no strict rule for that, although. But what usually, how people usually give the name that I'm telling you. So I would just write down the name of that class. Either I can write like underscore test, or I can directly like this test. Or sometimes people used to take this test word in the beginning and they would write down like test maths operation utility. So that completely differs between developer to developer, style to style. I usually prefer this one. I usually prefer this one. So class name, and then I append a keyword test over there, right? So this is my preference. You can go with the same. Otherwise, you can have your no problem. Okay. Now see. Now see. If you would go with query, you would going to come across a method called as static test method. This is the most important method. Test method. Static test method. All right. This is a keyword. This is a keyword. Every test class must at least have one test method, first of all. Every test class must have one test method. One, at least one. Can I have two? Yes. Can I have three? Yes. Can I have 4, 5, 6? Yes. You can have as many number of test methods. If you have multiple business logics that you wanted to be tested in separate blocks, you can have multiple test methods. Usually, what is a test method? Test method is a keyword. My testing logic, for example, I have implemented a business logic. I wanted to test that business logic. Business logic I have implemented inside a class. I have created a class. This is my class. This class internally have 3 business logics. This is my first business logic. This is my second business logic. And this is my third business logic. This is a class I have created. This is a class I have created. And this class I'm having three separate business logics. There are three certain different distinguished entities which I'm having inside in this class. Now I wanted to deploy this class. Before deployment of this class, I must have at least 75% of code coverage. It's a normal class, 75%. So what I do is to have that code coverage, I have created a test class for this. Now see, the test class must have something called as a test method, at least one. What you can do is you can have a single test method, and inside in that test method, you can build up the testing mechanism for all three of them. The testing mechanism goes inside in the same block. Or else what we can do is that depends on that depends on programmer to programmer. Okay, that depends on programmer to programmer, that you can have three separate test methods. You can have three. Usually this is what is followed. Usually this is followed. You can have three separate test methods. One for this one, another for this one, and another for this one. Usually this is followed. If you ask me, sir, what is your style? I'll say this one. I used to create separate test methods for every business logic. And that make my code readable, that make my code user friendly. But at least this is one thing. The most important thing over here is every test class must have test method, and your testing code is always written inside test method, right? So that was the introduction about test method. Now let's come to the property. That was the introduction. What is a test method? Who you are? Who are you? I am a test method. Okay, what you do? I'm going to perform the testing of your business logic. That is my duty. That is my job. That is my role. So what is your name? My name is test method. And every test class must at least have one test method. At least one. You can have multiple. Now see, let's come to the property. Test methods are always static. Test methods are always static. There is no non-static test method. If you try to give that, you will going to face the errors. Test methods are always void. Test method does not return anything to the calling environment. That's why return type is void. And then your method name. There's a test method, my method one, business method 1, 2, 3, something like that. So every test class must have at least one test method. And that should always be static and void. Now let's come to this. So this is what I was trying to say you, that every class must have at least one test method. I will go static test method, which is always void, And let's give any name. I'm giving test maths operations. You can give any name like this. Okay. Now, see, gradually I'm going to increase a little more complexities. Static test method. What is the error? Quickly check it out. Defining the type. Oh, of course, I understand what is the error. Can any one of you figure out what is the error? I am using a method called as test method, but test methods can only be used inside test classes. I have not defined this class as a test class yet. That is the reason we are getting this error. So I forgot to mention @test, not test. @test. Now, if I would try to save this, definitely this error would go on. That's good. So I'll have to start it from. I almost forgot to mention. Without this, if I would remove this annotation, this class becomes a normal class, and it is no more considered to be test class. And you can use this test method only inside test classes, right? So that's why this is all right. Let's move further. Let me try to complete this because we only have 20 minutes. And I have a very important announcement for every one of you. Please remind me if I forgot. Please remind me to talk on this at the end of the session, right? Chalo. So So the simplest way, see, if I would go to mass operation utility, let me show you this class over here. I'll refresh this interface. Let's try to understand one thing. You can see the code coverage from two different places. You can see the code coverage of this class. How much code coverage right now it's having? It's having none, as you can see. It's having none. I just highlight it for you guys. See. See this. None. You can see the code coverage from here as well, right? Or you can also see the code coverage. For example, if you wanted to see the total code coverage of your organization, you can go with this. Go with Apex classes, estimate your organization code coverage. And this is same in Classic and version Lightning, it is same. Current code coverage is 0% for because I haven't created any test classes so far. So the total code coverage of whole organization is 0%, which should ideally be 75%. चलो वो एक अलग बात है, but I am particularly interested in a class called as maths operation utility. So what I'm going to do, I would be opening this class. See, maths operations utility. We have created a class called maths operation utility and its test classes I'm working right now. So I would be opening this class, and if I wanted to see the code coverage of that, you'll have to look over here. Right side for classes and left side somewhere around here for triggers. I'll show you that as well. Right now, this class does not have any code coverage. As you can see, the code coverage is 0%, right? And if you wanted to see the code coverage of any trigger, how you can do that? Go with Apex triggers. And let me try to show you that as well. So if, for example, if there's a trigger called as an account trigger, I wanted to see the code coverage. Open that trigger, and on the left side, you will going to see the code coverage. That is 0%, right? This is where from the user interface, you can see the code coverage. Right now, we are looking for a class. We are writing it for a class. So I'll just open that class once again, maths operations utility. And mass operation utility, as you can see right now, is having 0% code coverage. We are working on that. We are working on a test class. All right. The simplest way of writing a test class, you should have an understanding you should have understanding of what this class is doing. Now, as you can see, there are four methods: addition, multiplication, division. There are four methods. Now, this method is implementing a certain business logic. The another method is also implementing something. This method also and this method. So there are four methods. Right? Even though if you are not interested in what is happening internally, actually we have to, ऐसा नहीं बोल रहा हूँ मैं कि जरूरी नहीं है, but हम step by step आगे बढ़ेंगे ना. We'll take baby steps to understand this concept. So actually, for writing a test class, you must have an understanding about what type of business logic is getting implemented inside in this method or in this method. So you must have that understanding. टेस्ट क्लासेस जब आप लिखते हो तो आपको वो बिजनेस लॉजिक क्या कर रहा है उसकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग होनी चाहिए, एटलीस्ट ऑन द ब्रॉड लेवल. You should not have to say, मतलब लाइन बाय लाइन जरूरी नहीं है, but at least you should have an understanding what type of business logic is getting implemented with this method. हमें उसकी जानकारी होना चाहिए. Without that, we cannot provide 100% code coverage. ठीक है, हम धीरे धीरे वहां तक पहुंचेंगे, डोंट वरी. अभी तो मैं सबसे सिंपलेस्ट वे बताता हूँ, and we would gradually going to increase what to say. I'm not going to use the word complexity. Rather, I will say that I would gradually increase. Like the components of this, and I'll gradually increase the context, the scope of the bandwidth of this. test classes, right? Now the simplest way is to call the methods, is to call them. Now, because see, all these methods, as you can see, they are static methods. Addition, multiplication, division, modulus, they are static methods. The benefit of a static method is you can call it anywhere without creating object. So how to call that? How to call that? So what I'm going to do is like I will inside in this I will I will start invoking, invoke the business logic methods here, right? Invoke it. How you will invoke? Maths utility, name of the class, name of the method, right? Maths utility dot division, maths utility dot multiplication, maths utility dot modulus division, isn't it? Right? Now, what I did, I am just trying to invoke them. Inside in this test classes, inside in this test class, I am just invoking the methods. I'm just calling the methods over here. There's a method called as addition inside in class. There's a class called as math operation utility. Inside in that class, there's a method called addition, division, multiplication, modulus. These are the part of the classes, right? These are certain modules. These are certain business logics, which has been written inside a class called as math operation utility. I'm just invoking them. I am invoking them over here inside in this class. Now, when this method addition is called, it requires 3 integers. I'll supply those 3 integers. You can supply any, right? This method division, when it is called, it would obviously require certain integers, right? It would require certain integers. Multiplication requires 2 integers. I'm going to supply that as well. The modulus also require the same. I'll going to give that as well, right? And now let me try to save this. Let me try to save this. All right. So this is the simplest way to write down a test class. Just call those methods. Just call every one of them. This is the simplest way to write down a test class. And even over here, the business logic was very simple. And that's why this works. Now, you have written test class. Ho gaya, ye bhi ho gaya. But abhi bhi, if you can see that code coverage comes out to be none. Code coverage comes out to be none. एक चीज जो मैं आप लोगों को बताना भूल गया, let me do one thing. I'm just removing this और मैं ये लाइन को थोड़ा सा थोड़ी देर के लिए कमेंट आउट कर देता हूँ. ठीक है? And let me now try to save this code. ठीक है? If you have observed or not, something has been removed from here. Something has been removed from here. Let me quickly, make the changes. What I did, I'll just revert out those changes. Let me show you. So, and let's say, so once again, I have all this, and let me now try to save it over here, and you just concentrate here. I'm saving it once again. I'm saving it once again. I'm saving it once again, and you just concentrate over here. See, what do you observe? What do you observe? There's a button. There's a button that comes, and that button is called as run test, right? So this button, run test, that only comes, it only appears for a test class. Any class which has been annotated with @ is test. This buttons only appears for the class. It does not appears for a normal class. If you are over here, see the button is gone. That run test button, it only appears for a test class. So after writing a test class, what you have to do, I'm telling you those steps. How would you run the test? How would you find the code coverage? There are 2 different ways to find that, right? There are 2 different ways. First, go to user interface, open that class or trigger, and here you can see the code coverage. But for trigger, it would be somewhere around left side. For classes, the code coverage, this is on the right side. User interface. Now, let me show you how we can check this. So first of all, what you have to do is like, I'm going with the test. I'm going with the test tab. You can see logs, tests, and everything. You can do it later as well. That's not an issue. First of all, you'll have to run the test. You have to run the test, right? And run test button, it appears only for the test class. For a normal class, there is nothing called as run test. Every such class, which is a test class, which have this @ is test annotation, it appears only for them. So I'm running this test. Run test. It has been over. हो गया. Testing हो गई है. Now I would go to that. I would go to a tab called as test tab. And I'll go to a tab called as test tab. The class name was maths operation utility. These are the name of all classes and triggers. Everything have been listed out. So I'm just trying to locate a class with the name maths operation utility. This is that class, maths operation utility. And now, as you can see, it has 100% code coverage. If you would make a double click over here, it would eventually take you to this class, and it would highlight all those which are covered in blue, which is not covered in red. So all those which is being covered are being shown into blue, and which is not covered would be come into red. Now this, I'll take one example for that as well later on. Okay. So now you can see the test coverage is 100%. You can see the test coverage is 100%. And if you would go to the user interface and you'll refresh this one, you can see it from here as well. See, the code coverage is 100%. 4 out of 4 matlab there were 4 methods, all 4 of them have been covered. Addition, multiplication, division, modulus, all 4 of them have been covered. So that's why 4 out of 4. Previously it was 0 out of 4. If we have observed this, 0 out of 4. Now it's 4 out of 4. So we have 100% code coverage. To deploy a class, we must at least have 75%. We are having 100%. If we have at least 75%, you can deploy the class. So this class can be deployed. You can definitely deploy this class. Although deployment cannot be carried out with developer edition, it's a drawback. But if you have created this class inside a sandbox, you can now deploy this either to sandbox or to production. If you are trying to deploy this on sandbox, you although don't require to have the code coverage. Code coverage are required only when you are deploying this on production. But it is always recommended to provide code coverages from the beginning itself, right? So go with this one by today. Go with this one. Tomorrow, I'm going to take certain other examples, and gradually we would going to understand a lot of the things about test classes. That's all for today. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions?
Sir, you were supposed to announce something.
Sorry, I didn't. Yeah.
You were supposed to announce something.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.